After much procrastination, it's finally time for part 2 of my makeup palette declutter. I've already decluttered my mini eyeshadow palettes and eyeshadow singles. I will leave the link to that video below, but today I'm going to be going through the drawer that has my more traditionally sized eyeshadow palettes as well as oversized palettes and face palettes. You're probably in for another lengthy declutter video, so we'll dive right in, but first, if you're new here, hi, my name is Miranda. Welcome to my channel where we talk all things budget beauty. If that sounds interesting to you, then become the newest member of the Slashed Squad by hitting subscribe and the bell icon. Okay, once again, I'm doing this spread out, which gives me a little bit more visibility. It's just a little easier to work this way, and then I'll put them back in the drawer. So as I mentioned, this is going to be most of my bigger eyeshadow palettes, as in not quads and not mini palettes. So we have, some pretty average sized. We have some much larger, like ultimate palettes, and then I do have face palettes in here as well. So why don't we just go one by one? This is the first one that I grabbed. It is the Norvina Anastasia palette. Actually, I want y'all to comment below. Do you pronounce this brand Anastasia or Anastasia? I've always said Anastasia. So this is a palette that I had lying around for a long time, but I only recently started using it, and I absolutely love it. Like, there's a reason why this is so raved about. The pigmentation is great. I love this color story. I just love that it's balanced between these cool purples and pinks, but we have some warm browns down here to work with. Let me just go ahead and swatch a couple of these. They are so buttery. I mean, look at all that pigment. This formula is just amazing. Now, this, I believe, was recently a part of the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty, and that would be an amazing time to buy it because obviously, the brand Anastasia is a little bit more expensive than I typically spend on makeup, but if you can find a deal or a sale or something like that, then this is what I would 100% recommend. Oh my gosh. Look at this rose gold. Look at that. Like, it's just so beautiful. I am going to go ahead and keep this. The only thing I don't like about it is the velvet packaging because as you can see right here, which I just did, it holds on. Oh gosh. It gets dirty so easily. I'm normally not handling it with swatches on my fingers though, so that was definitely my bad. I had gone so long without getting it super dirty. Okay, let's see if I can clean this up. No, I'm making it worse. No, this is actually kind of helping. All right, just because it's right on top here, let's go into this Physicians Formula All-Star palette. Now this came out around the same time as their matte butter bronzer, and it did have an exclusive shade of that matte butter bronzer formula. In general, I wasn't a huge fan of this palette. I felt like it really skewed toward fair and light skin tones. I mean, in Physicians Formula, I'm considered light medium, and I still felt like this was kind of hard for me to use. I did very much like this Rosé All Day Petal Glow highlighter blush, I guess you could call it. And so if I'm gonna have an all-in-one palette, I want to be able to use everything inside of it. And I felt like they did the Butter Collection palette, the one that they did with Whaley. That one works so well for me. So this one was just kind of like, eh. So this I think I am going to set aside to declutter. Next up, I have this one down here. This is the BH Cosmetics Levitan Prince palette. I'm not sure if this is still something you can buy. In case you were unaware, BH Cosmetics actually recently filed for bankruptcy. I have no idea what the future of the company is going to look like, if they're going to shut down or if they're going to be bought out. There are a lot of questions surrounding BH right now. Okay, yeah, I just went on their site and you can no longer buy this, so that is a bummer. This was actually one of my favorite palettes that they put out in terms of collabs with other content creators. I thought that this was a beautifully balanced palette between neutrals and brights because you could really work the brights in with the neutrals to create a cohesive look. Plus, the pigmentation was definitely there. I mean, BH has always done shadows really well, and this was that was an awful swatch. my finger caught there at a weird angle. Now, the thing is, as a content creator, it doesn't benefit me much to hold on to discontinued products just because I'm not going to be able to really feature them in videos and photos. I wouldn't want to because then you can't go and pick it up yourself. So I'm going to set this aside. I really do like it and I see a use for it. So I might just hold on to it for personal use, but I am going to keep my eye out for these shades going through the rest of these palettes. Now we are in the same boat for this BH palette, which was a charity palette they did, I believe in 2020. This was to benefit Step Up, which is an organization that caters to personal development of girls and young women. This again was such a beautiful palette. I'm such a sucker for purple themed palettes, so I absolutely loved the ones in this. But again, I felt like this gave enough to create some subtle everyday looks with a pop of pink or going really, really sultry. This Success Story Rose Gold, absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to swatch Inspiration for you. And this, like, the mattes are so freaking soft. Like, I was really, really surprised to hear that they weren't doing well just because their product is good. Like, their makeup is spectacular. I was so proud of them for getting into Ulta after being like an online brand for so many years. Really beautiful stuff. So this is another one that I think I'm going to keep in the same pile as the other BH Cosmetics palette, where I'm going to keep a lookout for these shades. And if there's something that's still more available that I'd be able to share with y'all, then I will probably opt for keeping that. I guess we might as well do like all of the BH Cosmetics palettes at once. And I mean, you can tell how much of a fan I was of the brand and still am. I'm rooting for them. Take Me Back to Brazil palette. This is such a great palette if you want to just add a bunch of colors to your collection at once in terms of like having rainbow shades. The only downside to this palette is how small the pans are. They are pretty tiny, but again, they pack a punch. And what I really like that they did with this is that they gave you these two highlight shades and a black in a larger pan, assuming that those would be the shades that you use most often. And I just thought that was a really, really cool design idea. Now, this particular formula was not as soft and buttery and blendable as some of their other palettes. This is kind of like their basic formula, I guess you could say, because there is a difference between this and like the two palettes I just showed you. But that's not to say they were bad at all. The mattes are just like a tiny bit more powdery in this one, still incredibly pigmented. So as you could see, they're not like as opaque and punchy on the first swipe as the other two, but still a lot of color. They are buildable. Very, very solid rainbow palette. Now this palette you can still get on their website right now. It is 25% off, so it's only $15. And I have never been on the BH Cosmetics website when there wasn't a sale, so I'm going to say you can usually get this between 12 and 15. Absolutely worth it. And I think I'm going to hold on to this just purely from a functional standpoint because this is a great kind of selection of colors down the spectrum of the rainbow that I don't necessarily have in other palettes. Now, another palette that you can still get on their website, and this is probably one of my most used BH Cosmetics palettes, and I believe in a past video I ranked this one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes, period. This is their Hanging in Hawaii palette, and right now it's on sale for about $12, and again, I've never really seen it higher than that. This is such a perfect neutral palette for me because we do have like your staple neutrals. We have champagnes, we have cool browns, we have warm browns, but we do have these pops of like apricot, I want to say, and pink and a little bit of a purple situation. I think there was a point where I was just wearing this every single day. Now this is again a little bit more of their elevated formula versus the Take Me Back to Brazil palette where the mattes are a lot softer, just so silky. It really reminds me of the Tarte Amazonian Clay formula. Like that's how good these are. Hashtag save BH Cosmetics, y'all. They're a little bit crumbly, but that's because they're so freaking soft. Look at that. Hold on, I could blend this pink a little better. So much pigment. And then each of these champagnes were so beautiful, and you could use them for the brow bone. You can use them for the lid. Heck, I would even dip into this and just lightly dust it on my cheekbones because they were so freaking gorgeous. Look at that. I mean, have you ever seen such a beautiful sight? So again, I think I am going to hold on to this one, especially because they still sell it. Now this one, on the other hand, is not available anymore, even though it was from the same line as the Hangin' in Hawaii palette. They did all of these destination themed palettes, and this one's really pretty, especially if you like smoky eyes, but I just didn't find myself using it as much, and I guess I wasn't alone because they don't sell this anymore, but you can definitely see we've got much more of a smoky, jewel-toned vibe in here. This would be like a really pretty fall palette. But yeah, I'm not one to wear a lot of super dark and smoky looks, which is probably why I just haven't gravitated towards this a lot, even though it's gorgeous. Here's Azul. Very, very pretty. Here's that flamenco shade. Oh my God. Oh my God. I don't know if I've ever used this shade, but now I'm crying because I should have. And what was this one? Was this Mediterranean or Picasso? I forgot. Like just beautiful blues, which I feel like is really hard to do and find at the drugstore level. A lot of blues always end up looking kind of green or gray, and oh my Lord, I cannot get over this shade. I'm gonna keep this because I can see myself creating some really pretty looks out of it, and maybe I just needed to be re-inspired. And you know, this year I am stepping outside of my comfort zone a lot more, so maybe that'll help me gravitate towards this more than I have in the past. So I'm going to keep this for my own personal use. And I guess we'll see what happens come the next declutter. Okay, so right on top here, we have this hard candy green palette infused with hemp oil. I don't quite remember. Yeah, it was infused with hemp oil, but it was not a CBD product. It's called Smoke Out. I mean, it's a very weed themed palette. Like, let's not beat around the bush. Now, I don't necessarily remember really liking this palette, and you can tell by, you know, the patterns in the shades that it's rarely been used. So why don't we go ahead and dip into these? I'm not going to touch the glitters because that's going to be a nightmare that I'm never going to be able to take back. But I'll go ahead and swatch some of these other shades. Now, just upon first touch, they are a little bit stiff feeling, even that shimmer. Ooh, that's not bad actually. That's kind of pretty. Let's see the matte though. The matte leaves a little bit to be desired. It's not super pigmented, but it's not awful. Like, it didn't go on super patchy. Let me see if I build it up. Now, it does look like this is still available at Walmart for about $10, which I think is a pretty good price. Honestly, I'm kind of wondering why I haven't tried this out more. And this would be really good for St. Patrick's Day coming up. Ooh, that one's really pretty. Okay. Ooh. Okay, there's a lot of potential with this palette. Not a huge fan of the mattes, but these satin shades going on real pretty. Okay, I think I'm gonna hold on to this and see if I can get use out of it this upcoming month. I know we took a little detour, but I did find some more BH Cosmetics palettes, so I'm just gonna hold on to them, put them kind of front and center. I think there's only 2 other ones that I missed. So this is another one of their destination palettes, Summer in Saint-Tropez. This is another one that they do not sell anymore. This is probably my least used. This is just very, very purely brights. Kind of wondering if I could get use out of it now. Let's kind of see what these swatch like. Ooh, that red orange is beautiful. I love that. I don't know. I'm just not feeling inspired by this color story. I think I'm gonna go ahead and declutter this. And finally, this I'm probably gonna declutter. They do not sell this anymore, although this was such a great palette. This is their Studio Pro Ultimate Neutrals palette, and this kind of took me back to their old school, like double-decker 120 color palettes, but it was with their updated formula. You know what this reminds me of now, looking at it, is like the Tati Beauty Neutrals palette almost, because you clearly have very similar shades repeated, but in different finishes, and it kind of like goes down the line. Yeah, but I have not reached for it recently, and again, it's been discontinued, so I think I am gonna go ahead and declutter this. Also, this is a pain to store. I have to kind of like wiggle it into my drawers just because of the size. And on that note, let's talk about this one here. This is another one where I bought this before the mini version came out, but if they had both options, I would have gone with the mini version. But at this point in my life, I would go with no version because I'm not a huge James Charles supporter anymore. Now, I kind of want to talk about this also alongside the Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star palette because I feel very similarly about these creators, and these are not products that I would buy today because I would not want to support these creators. However, you're not going to see me destroying them or throwing them out just for the sake of that because I already spent my money on it. Like the money the money's exchanged hands. If I have a use out of it, I'll use it until it's done, and then I will not repurchase it. That's kind of my standpoint because I'm not going to waste it just to waste it. Like, I'm not affecting either of these creators by throwing out the palette at this point. Like, I already bought it. You know what I mean? Now, on that note, this palette I've hung on to way too long and I don't use it. So in that case, I feel a lot better about letting it go. I do have a whole video where I created a week's worth of looks using this palette, which, you know, a lot of people had strong opinions about this color story and whether it was really practical or usable. It didn't seem like the shades really worked well together. I did manage to get some pretty cool looks out of it. But again, at the end of the day, I do feel like it's kind of a limiting palette, and since filming that, I don't think I ever reached into this just to play around or even for like an actual look for an event or anything. So I'm gonna go ahead and declutter this. Now, on the other hand, with the Morphe and James Charles palette, this is a palette that I continue to get use out of. This is a little bit, you know, a lot of people do consider this a rainbow palette because you can find every color in the rainbow. I'm wondering if I need to keep both of these because here's the deal. I actually really enjoy the Morphe shadow formula, and I think the formula in this palette is better than the formula in this palette, even though on a normal day I would consider BH and Morphe to be very on par with each other. But like I said about the Take Me Back to Brazil palette, this is not their like most updated formula. I feel like I would get more use out of this palette. But if I'm going to do looks and share them, I don't think I'd want to share this palette and promote this palette at this point in my life. So while I am going to keep both of them, I don't think I will be sharing looks that I create with this one. It would be a purely personal use palette where I can get very similar ones in the BH Cosmetics palette and be okay with promoting it. So that's my 2 cents on, you know, continuing to use products where you don't necessarily support the creators or the brand. If you already have it and you like it, use it, but then you can decide from there whether you want to continue supporting them. All right, moving these closer to the middle now that we've gotten all those BH Cosmetics palettes out of the way, we have a little bit more variety. I'm just going to pick this one out right off the bat because I am going to go ahead and keep this. It's relatively new in my collection. This is the British Museum and ZC Cosmetics collab. This is a brand that's available on Amazon. I did do a video about this brand, and I think the thumbnail said the most beautiful makeup ever, because not only are the shades beautiful and they perform so well, but the packaging is just simply a work of art. Like, they just have so much detail in the packaging. This one has this sort of suspended glitter feature underneath the Alice in Wonderland artwork. It is breathtaking. All of their products are like this. This particular palette, I gotta admit, I should probably use it more, but the attention to detail, this checkerboard, which killed me to ruin when I used it. I also really like this glitter shade because it actually stays on your skin without needing glitter glue, although I obviously recommend glitter glue. I don't know, there's something about it that sticks to my lid all day without needing anything else. That's a really pretty glitter topper. Like I mentioned, this is a brand that's available on Amazon, and they are a Chinese beauty brand. And I'm noticing kind of a rise in Chinese beauty brands here in the United States. Another one that's similar to this is called Catkin Cosmetics. They kind of have a similar, let me do this one better, a similar vibe where they also put in a lot of detail to their packaging. So anyway, I really like this, if anything, like a display piece, so I'm gonna keep this. Now this is the palette that I was previously talking about, the Physicians Formula Butter Collection and Whaley collaboration. This is a face palette that works really, really well for my light medium skin. Both of these highlights, perfect for me. Both of these blushes are perfect for me and pigmented enough to show up. And the bronzers, you can tell I use this Sunset bronzer a lot more than the deep bronzer. The deep bronzer is also a little less matte, which is why I don't use it as much, but I could use this to like warm up the face a little bit. But this one I definitely want to keep. And this again is something that I travel with all the time just because it is such an easy all-in-one palette and all of the shades do work for me in some capacity. And with it being so thin and compact, this is a lot easier than me packing usually a blush, a bronzer, and a highlight in more chunkier compacts. This can kind of slip into a pocket really easy. Now, speaking of face and highlight palettes, I do have this one from Pixi, the Rach Loves Collab palette. Oh my gosh, they stopped making this. I don't know why. It is the most beautiful highlights. Generally, I wouldn't really find the need for like a whole palette of just highlights. I would probably more so want the option of individual compacts, but if there's anything Pixi does right, it's highlights, especially as someone who loves a really high pigmented, glowy and not shimmery highlight. Pixi does it best. Look at this. It's so pretty. Now this one had also this kind of cool purple highlight called Zipper. The other ones are pretty champagne-y. Like this was just kind of a novelty highlight, kind of a festival vibe, but my gosh, this one lace is a little bit more metallic. These ones are slightly softer. And then they have this one called Knit, which wouldn't work for me as a highlight, but if you had deep skin, this would look absolutely beautiful. And that would bring a little bit of that warmth. Now again, I feel bad because I'm gushing over this palette and you can't get it anymore. So here's the thing, even though I absolutely love, love, love these highlights, I would much rather keep on hand like individual Pixi highlights versus having this as a palette and knowing that I might use like one or two more regularly. And the fact that, again, you cannot buy it anymore. I am going to go ahead and declutter this. I feel like you can tell like how overdue this decluttering was because so much of this has been discontinued. All right, I do want to pull this one out of the mix, the NYX Modern Dreamer palette. Now, I have used this pretty heavily, but I gotta say it's not my favorite palette. And I think I've said this in the past, but NYX makes some great makeup. Eyeshadow is not their strong suit, which I think is a little crazy because full price, this is a $35 palette. Like that is on Morphe level for very, very much less than Morphe quality. I don't know, they make amazing eyeliner, they make amazing lipstick, they make amazing blush, but eyeshadow, they just haven't perfected yet. It's not that it's necessarily bad, it's just not on par with some of the other stuff you can find at the drugstore, and especially not at the prices that they are selling it at. So I was really drawn to the variety of shades in this palette, but just the formula is pretty stiff. It's kind of hard to blend without shearing out. The shimmers definitely do better, but if half the palette is like hard to use, then like, you know, it's not as good as other stuff you can find at the drugstore. Like, what is that? What is this? Okay, this blue is a little bit better though. Still not as punchy as I wish, but definitely smoother. I just kept it so long because of the variety and I kind of wanted to, you know, give it a fair shot. This one's actually not so bad, this teal. But in general, I just don't find myself reaching for this because when I do, the look that I have in my head never comes out that way because of the lack of workability in some of these shades. So this one's definitely going to be a declutter for me, and I'm going to be on the lookout to replace this type of color story. I mean, in general, my hope for doing this declutter is I get to repopulate with newer palettes because so much of this is outdated, but yeah, that one needed to go. Now I do have these Pixi ones. Why don't we just go through these? This first one is going to definitely be a declutter just because I really don't like using lip palettes. I don't find them useful in the way that I do makeup. They could be really helpful for people who want the variety and maybe want a lot of lipstick colors without using a lot of space for tubes, but for me, I don't know. I don't like applying my lipstick like this with a brush. The one thing that's kind of cool about this formula though is you could use these shades as a blush as well, so you can kind of match your blush and your lipstick. But again, that's just not something that I find myself doing. Now this one is their Eye Reflection Shadow Palette in Natural Beauty. There are 4 versions of this palette. I gotta say, I feel like people sleep on Pixi's eyeshadows. They are not bad at all, but because they are a little bit pricey for what we consider drugstore beauty, I think that's why they get kind of shrugged off. This palette is $24, which it's a little bit much for what it is. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I do like the quality of the shadow itself. What I do not like is this packaging. I hate this packaging. It's so inconvenient, and I've had more than one hinge of these palettes break on me and like crumble. But I do get asked about neutral, cool toned palettes all the time, and this is a great option if that's something that you're into. We have just these neutral taupey shades. We've got a little bit of a mauve going on right here, and these shimmery shadows are just like their highlights. They're so soft and metallic and pigmented, but they do a matte pretty well too. It's very soft, very buttery, like really, really solid pigment, soft and blendable and buildable. So I would love to hold on to this because this is something you can still get on the Pixi website, and I also believe at Target. I'd love to start using it more myself. Now, I thought that they did a pretty good job with this palette as well, and this was a collab with Promise, who is a beauty content creator here on YouTube. You may know her from her insane makeup transformations into celebrities. This is an all-in-one face palette. Well, it's more of like a contour and highlight face palette because we don't really have a blush in here. But we do have these matte bronzers, which I'm a huge fan of. And then we have these 2 highlight shades. We've got this, which you can kind of use as like a setting powder, banana powder, and this matte highlighting shade as well. It kind of, the mattes reminded me of the old Kat Von D Shade and Light palette. I was really happy to see that they included these bronzer shades that would work better on tan and deeper skin because I just don't feel like we see that a lot in all-in-one face palettes. So obviously this is not something that I'm going to be using on my face, but if you have deeper skin than I do, then that might work really, really well. And the thing about this and a lot of Pixi's palettes in general is that they can be a little multi-purpose. So even if I can't necessarily use that dark shade like as a contour, I could totally use it on my eyes or like as a liner shade. And same goes for these highlights. Like this gold in the middle is definitely probably a little too deep gold for my skin tone to use as a straight up highlight, but that is absolutely beautiful and I would love to wear it on my eyes. So I do kind of keep that into consideration when thinking about some of these Pixi palette prices. Say that 5 times fast. And again, this is still available at Target. This is $22. So again, it's a little up there, but I think for what you get and how multi-purpose this could be a really good staple in people's collections. I am going to go ahead and keep this. Now this one I don't think I'm going to keep just because I don't feel like it adds a lot to my collection. This was their collaboration with Tina Young. It was their Feelin' Fresh eyeshadow palette. And I don't know, this one, it just kind of didn't spark joy for me. It was a little bit too neutral and we had some kind of like beachy, summery pops of color, but I don't know, this was just a little boring to me. So I am going to go ahead and declutter that. Okay, so we do not have all that many palettes left. Let me just pull this one out really quickly because this is relatively new in my collection and I do want to play around with it some more, so I will be keeping it. It is the Wet n Wild Cotton Candy Clouds palette from their little Twin Stars collection. So I do have a video about this entire collection foundation where I do like my full face using it. And this is just very much like 2022 makeup trends in a palette. We've got the glitter, we've got the pastels and kind of the soft aesthetic. But if you want to see me use this, I will go ahead and link that video. Now, yet again, we have a palette that's not really available anymore, although I have seen this pop up at Nordstrom Rack. This was one of my favorite Urban Decay palettes. I'm kind of sad that they don't make it anymore. I thought that this was a more useful color story than like half of the Naked palettes. So I was really surprised that they didn't keep this around long enough or longer. And can we just talk about how this folds back all the way? Oh, that is so helpful. Like when you're traveling to just be able to like lay this flat. I loved that. I'll go ahead and swatch some of these. I mean, Urban Decay makes some of my favorite eyeshadows in terms of the formula. Like they just do so well with their neutrals, with their brights. And I thought this was just one of their better color stories. Oh, look at that blue and the green, just so beautiful. I really liked the variety in this one. You know, I feel like some of their more recent Naked palettes were a little too niche. Like they were just so focused on surrounding one color, whether it be, you know, we have the Ultraviolet up here, or their Honey palette. I just felt like this is a lot more wearable. You can get so many more looks out of this. Distinct looks, rather. So even though this is, again, one of those palettes that isn't necessarily widely available anymore, you might be able to find it at those kinds of discount places, I am going to hold on to it because, like I said, this is definitely one of my most used and favorite palettes to grab and go with on the run. Now, while we're talking about Urban Decay, let me just grab the Naked Ultraviolet. So I did talk about this in a video, kind of just going over whether I think it's worth the splurge. I really think that this is one of those palettes that it'd be nice if you found it on sale, if it was in Ulta 21 Days of Beauty, and if you didn't already have these shades in your collection. But I don't know, I was really excited about a purple themed Urban Decay palette, but then they went ahead and stuffed it almost halfway with neutrals, and I was like, I don't know. And I know that's kind of contradicting myself because I've said with a bunch of other palettes today that I appreciate a balance in neutrals and bright colors, but considering like that's the whole vibe of the Ultraviolet, and like how many purples did they actually give us? And where does this teal come out of nowhere, or aqua? I don't know. It was just kind of one of those things where if you were truly looking for a purple palette, I'm not sure you would actually like this, even though the shades that you do get are very pretty. I think I did say in that video though that the formula wasn't necessarily up to par with a lot of my other Urban Decay products. Like these feel a lot stiffer even than the palette I just swatched, even though the intensity is definitely there for sure. I mean, these are gorgeous, right? So I definitely had a mixed opinion about this palette, but what I can tell you is I never reach for it. So in that regard, I think it's okay to keep the brush and declutter the palette. Next up, we have this Revolution Pro palette. You can still get this on the brand's website, but I don't think they stock it at Ulta anymore. They do have a newer version of this at Ulta though. This was called the Revolution Pro New Neutral Palette, and now they have like a new neutral rose palette or something that's on the Ulta website. And that one's a little bit more rose goldy, although I'm not sure how much more rose you can get after this. This was one of those color stories that was so popular in 2018. It seemed like all the new drugstore eyeshadow palettes were just these shades over and over again, including the glitters here. Now, one of the reasons why I actually really enjoyed this palette was it's mostly mattes, actually. I mean, we do have obviously the glitters, we have some shimmer metallic shades over here, but the majority of these shades are matte, and I'm just a sucker for a good, rich, blendable matte, and this definitely gave that. I'll swatch a few of the shades for you here. Got that one. Just really easy to work with. and the metallic shades are very high impact as well. Something else they did in this palette was they included this based shade, which is actually a creamy primer base type of product. That I wasn't a huge fan of, the fact that they did that, because as you can imagine, it got a little dingy since it's alongside a bunch of powders. But in general, I think I just kind of got tired of working with this same color concept over and over again. And so for that reason, I am going to go ahead and declutter this. Now, speaking of Makeup Revolution and Makeup Obsession are by the same brand, and you can find Makeup Obsession typically at Target. And this was their Rady Dusk palette, which was a collaboration with the content creator Get Ready with Rady. And I loved this palette and this formula. The pigmentation was amazing. The formula was so soft, and I really loved what they did with this collection of shades. It's just another one of those kind of jewel toned, sultry palettes, but we've got these gorgeous metallics. Now, this palette I don't believe is available in the US anymore, or like at US Targets, but they do still sell it. Sorry, that got a little weird because I still had some makeup remover on my arm. That was not the shadow's fault. This is still available on the Revolution Beauty London website, and I do believe Rady is a UK influencer. So I'm not sure if you can like buy off of there and have them shipped to the US, but if you are in the UK, then this is still something that is available to you, and I 100% recommend it. Yeah, I feel like Makeup Obsession as a brand hasn't really gotten as big here in the US as Revolution Beauty is, but it's basically like the same formulas, like, oh, so beautiful. Now, I definitely have not been using this palette very often. Like I said, I just haven't been really into heavy smoky eyes, and I did just keep that Barcelona palette, so I'm not necessarily sure I need both. So I think I am gonna go ahead and declutter this, but if this is available to you where you live, yeah, I would highly suggest it. All right, let's get this one out of the way. This is a Too Faced palette, the Enchanted Forest palette. This was obviously a holiday themed palette that I believe was one of their like value sets. So this probably came with like a mini Better Than Sex mascara and a lip injection. This I thought was so pretty. It's sort of berry leaning. We do have quite a few like berry shades and the purples and the pinks, but we do have some relatively subtle neutrals, a lot of good metallics, and they did include like a face palette in there as well. Now this bronzer, it's a little light for my skin tone, but I think I could get away with using it for just a very subtle contour. I do wish that they were separated though. I don't know, does anybody else find the need to have like all of your products in one palette, like eyeshadow, blush, highlight, and bronzer? It's just like when you do those things, you're not going to be able to cater to everyone, right? And like I said, with other palettes, if these don't work for your face, you can definitely use them for your eyes, if anything. But if they do work for you, then this would be awesome to travel with. And again, it folds all the way back, so you can just lay it down flat. For some reason, that's a big thing for me in packaging. Nope, no mirror though. I'm kind of comparing it to the BH Cosmetics Hangin' in Hawaii palette, because that one also has some like pinks and berries. Like these two shades right here totally match. Those ones, not so much. A few in the middle. Yeah, I think I'm just going to hold on to the BH one and call this Declutter. Oh, we have another Urban Decay one that I did not catch. This is the Naked Reloaded palette. I feel like this was probably one of the least hyped up Naked palettes out of all of them. This one has like a weird kind of puffy fabric packaging. So this, I mean, you know, the Nakeds are known for being neutral palettes. This one kind of took on a little bit of like a peachy, bronzy vibe, but then we have this kind of like gunmetal silver as well. I also like what they did with this one with the larger pans on either side with these neutral kind of, this would be a good transition, this would be a good highlight. So full price, this is $44, which is actually a little bit cheaper than some of the other Naked palettes, but you can get it at Ulta, Sephora, or the brand's website, but you could wait, and this will probably show up in an Ulta 21 Days of Beauty sale. I'll go ahead and swatch a few of them. It's a solid you know, neutral palette. I think it's a great everyday color story, especially if you do love these bronze shades specifically and kind of the warm neutral vibe. But for $44, I just don't necessarily think that it's super unique enough, even though the formula is so friggin' pretty. I am such a sucker for like coppers and bronzes like that. There we go. Nice and blended. So pigmented. Let me go into this like peach shade. Still so much pigment. Really, really pretty. I just think that it's pretty commonplace, especially now. I just think we've seen so many brands do this color story now that you don't necessarily need this one, but for half price, I would say definitely pick it up. Now, this is another one that shows up often in those types of half off sales, the beauty events. This is the Too Faced Natural Matte Eyeshadow Palette. I have had some version of this palette in my collection for probably the past 10 years because they've done like different versions of it and then they updated the packaging. So I used to have the Natural Eye palette where it wasn't just all mattes, but this one is. And I just absolutely love the Too Faced shadow formula. And this is like the perfect neutral matte shades for me. I cannot believe this still has the chocolate smell to them because I've had this for a little bit. I feel like maybe this version I got in 2018, 19. Too Faced shadows, I've always said, have been some of my favorites because they just perform exactly how you want them to. They always translate on the eye, how they look in the palette, so you can really plan out your looks and it's going to come out right. And for me, they're formula is like just the right amount of soft where you get so much pigment and you get the blendability, but they're not as crumbly as some other shadow formulas. So like, you know, earlier I was swatching the Urban Decay and some of their softer shades kind of come off crumbly. It can give you a little bit more fallout, and I haven't really experienced that with Too Faced. Like it's just the right consistency. They just got it right. So I am going to go ahead and keep this, especially after decluttering the limited edition holiday Too Faced palette that we did. We only have 3 more palettes to talk about, and from such different brands as well. So let's just go over this one first. It is the only eyeshadow palette from Juvia's place that I have, so I think I do want to hold on to it. This is the Magic Mini palette. This is still available on the brand site. I think I got mine at Ulta, and I don't think they still carry this. Now, this is a little bit pricey. It is $30, and you can get like 20% off if you sign up for Juvia's Place emails. So that's one way to get it a little cheaper. I don't know if I would buy it again for $30. I mean, the quality is definitely there though. Very, very soft, super, super pigmented. I just think like from a budget standpoint, it's not the most usable in my collection. Oh my gosh. Or wearable rather, but this green. I think the reason I've held on to it so much is because I tell myself, oh, I would definitely dip in even if it's just for this one shade or these 2 shades, because alone these colors are freaking magnificent. But do I end up doing that? No. It's one of those scenarios where, you know, if I'm working in another palette, I very rarely think to go and open another palette for a specific shade, but it kills me to part with this because the colors are so pretty. So do I just hold on to it one more time and see where we're at once the next declutter comes around and see if I've actually gotten around to using it? Okay, I think I'm going to keep it. You know, we're doing pretty well with this declutter, so I'm going to keep it. And we'll see how it goes. Now let's talk about this e.l.f. 18 Hit Wonders palette. I was really excited about e.l.f. doing these 18 pan palettes because I feel like at the time they hadn't really been doing a lot of larger scale eyeshadow palettes. And this was like kind of a rainbow palette. Like this kind of reminds me a little bit of the James Charles palette where you have like the rainbow aspect, but then there's a lot of complementary shades thrown in. We've got neutrals, and I felt like this would serve so many looks. I wasn't like super, super keen on the formula. Like you can even tell with that yellow, it's just a little bit chalky. Like, it's just like, it was nothing to write home about. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay. It's not great. It's just one of those things where if there are better options at the drugstore, then why not use those? This money shade was kind of cool. It's like a greenish, brownish shift. But yeah, again, I just really didn't find myself using this palette at all. And if I did, it was more for the neutrals versus the brights because I wasn't super happy with how the brights performed and blended. So in that case, it's like, why am I not just using some other neutral palette? You know what I mean? So I think that tells me all that I need to know that I am gonna go ahead and declutter this. And finally, last but certainly not least, is the Kokie Arabian Nights eyeshadow palette. So y'all have heard me talk about Kokie a lot on this channel. I think they are so underrated. They kind of started out being more available at Sally Beauty, but now you can find them a little bit more readily at like supermarket beauty aisles. So I know that my personal Kroger supermarket carries them in the beauty aisle, and they do have this palette. So this is just, oh my gosh, like more people need to know about this. I have done a whole video on it, and I do have a 25% off coupon if you want to buy this from Kokie's website. So I will leave all those details below. But if you love blues and greens, but you do want a well-rounded palette, this is for sure gonna be for you, because as you can see, we have some warm neutrals. Like half of this palette is warm neutrals, and then half of this palette is greens and blues and purples, and they are all just to die for. So let me just dip into Fairy Tale. This is probably my favorite shade ever. It reminds me of my birthstone, which is aquamarine. And this is like a $15 or $12 palette, something like that. It is crazy. Like this has better blendability than some of the high-end shadows that I swatched today. So this one is Jewel, just a gorgeous deep blue. And what I love about this palette is that the metallics and the shimmers and the mattes, they all blend together really well. So it's easy to mix and match and get a lot of great complete looks out of this. I'm for sure gonna keep this, and I definitely need to use this more. I feel like because I've been spending more time in my mini palette drawer, I've kind of forgotten about this, but it is such a great palette. All right, let's see how many we actually ended up keeping. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So funny enough, with those two BH Cosmetics palettes that I set aside that I am deciding to declutter, we have literally cut the drawer in half. We have kept 15 and decluttered 15. Well, I would consider getting rid of half my palettes a pretty successful declutter, but let me know which drawer you want me to declutter next. I have my blushes, bronzers, and highlights, or my eyeliners and mascaras. Tell me in the comments below. Today's shout out goes to LaJerica. Thanks for being a member of the Slashed Squad, and join me over in this video next where I try a full face of new drugstore makeup. I'll see you over there. Bye!